right, it's time to multiply integers now. Multiplying and dividing, I believe, are a little easier than the adding and subtracting. They have two rules, and you don't have to decide, oh, well, I've got same or different signs. Do I add or subtract them? Do I keep the same sign? Do I use the larger sign? I think you'll find that the rules are a little easier. So I'm going to use some little counters to help show how I get my answer, and then we'll come up with the rule. So multiplying integers with different signs says the product of two integers with different signs is negative, and here's why. Let's say that I'm doing 2 times negative 3. They have two different signs, right? Different signs means one's positive and one's negative. Well, in multiplication, the first number says how many groups, and the second number has how many are in each group. So if I have two groups of 3 negatives, I do filled in dots for negative. So 2 groups of 3 negatives, what do I have in total? I have 6 negatives. So it said when I have different signs, the answer will be negative. Was that true? Yes. When I have two integers with the same sign, the answer is positive. So like when you did 2 times 3, right? We already know two groups of, I meant to do positives, is 6 positives. Now when you do the negative sign, I know it's hard to draw negative groups, so this negative also means the opposite, because right, a negative is the opposite of 7 groups of 4 negatives. Well, 7 groups of 4 negatives would be negative 28, but the opposite of that is positive 28. So here's the rule. If I have same signs, I get a positive. Let's do this. Different signs. I get a negative answer. Sometimes you have more than 2 numbers. So if you think about this, every 2 numbers I have will be positive. So that means if I then have 4 negatives, I'm still going to get positive. So if I have an even number of negatives, like 4 negatives, 6 negatives, because every 2 negatives that I have is going to give me a positive. So when I have 2 negatives, 4 negatives in the problem, 6 negatives, 8 negatives in the problem, I'm always going to have a positive answer. If I have only 1, right, I'm going to end up with a negative, right? So if every 2 is a positive, that's going to be positive, and a positive and a negative is going to be negative. That means if I have an odd number, because every 2 is positive, so that extra one's an odd one out, it's going to make it negative. Odd number of negatives, that'll give me a negative answer, okay, when I have more than 2. All right, so here we go. I've got negative 5 times 7. That's 35. Different signs, negative. 6 times 9, you just multiply like normal, is 54. Different signs is negative. 10 times 4 is 40. Different signs is negative. 12 times negative 2, 12 times 2 is 24. Same signs, positive. 5 times 11 is 55. Different signs is negative. So I always multiply first and then decide if it's positive or negative after. I try just to focus on the numbers. 15 times 4 is 60. I've got same signs, so it's positive. If you want to do the next 2 rows on your own, go ahead and pause it and then unpause it to get the answers. 14 times 2 is 28. Different signs is negative. 6 times 14 is 84. And there's no negatives to worry about. 18 times 2 is 36. Different signs is negative. 9 times 10 is 90. Different signs is negative. 12 times 6 is 72. Different signs, negative. 11 times 11 is 121. Same signs, positive. Okay, now we're going on to some with the 3. So we have to look to see if we have an even number of negatives or an odd number of negatives, because we can't just say same and different. If we want to try and do these a little quicker, we can just look at whether we have an even number or an odd number of negatives. Because it's all addition, I can do it in any order I want. So I can multiply whatever's easiest, and then I can look back at even and odd number of negatives. So when I'm looking at these two here, I think that multiplying 4 and 5 is easiest because it gives me 20, and 20 times 4 is 80, and then I look at my negatives. There's an even number of negatives, right, because every 2 will be positive, and a positive is positive. I'm going to multiply, I guess it doesn't really matter, 6 times 7 is 42, 42 times 2 is 84. I only see one negative, and an odd number of negatives gives me a negative answer. I've got, let's do the 10 times 4 first. That's 40, and 40 times 6 is 240. I have 1, 2, 3 negatives. An odd number of negatives gives me a negative answer, because when I have two negatives, that'll give me a positive. A positive and a negative is a negative. So I'm not going to continue actually doing the multiplication. I just want to practice whether or not this answer will be positive or negative. So I see I've got 2 negatives. It's an even number. It's going to be a positive answer. I've got an odd number because there's only 1. It's going to be a negative answer. Here I see an even number of negatives. It's going to be a positive answer. So knowing whether or not it's going to be a positive or a negative answer is important. Okay? Simplifying. Simplifying, because it's multiplication and we can change the order around, we can multiply the two numbers together and simplify it. So we're not solving it. Simplifying means we're going to make it a little simpler, less numbers in the problem. So I'm going to multiply my negative 2 and 3 and get negative 6, and I'm still going to have that 6x. So negative 6x. I'm going to multiply the two numbers together, get negative 20, and it's still going to be times y, because I can only simplify the number part because I don't know what the letters are worth. So I can't solve it. 9 and negative 2, because this is all multiplication, is negative 18 times z. I'm going to multiply the negative 5 and the negative 6, get positive 30 and a. If you want to pause and try these and then unpause, you can. Order doesn't matter when it's all multiplication, so I'm going to multiply my two numbers, negative 24 and then times t. My two numbers, doesn't matter where they are in the multiplication. If it's all multiplication, the order can be in any order. Negative 2 and then n. Multiply negative 5 and 2, I get negative 10 and w. And multiply these two, I get negative 16 and c.